the question was around whether or not the design community in particular was compensated properly for the amount of labor that goes into making a set or a costume designer or something like that, often having to do it themselves. But I kind of want to like open that and whether or not designers are kind of exploited for the community mentality and the kind of like, we're all in this together, the kind of collegial vibe. And I kind of want to open that up a little bit to just theater making in general and ask, like, is that vibe that we're talking about, and like, I wonder if that's also a means of exploitation for us throughout, you know, like I have seen Matt build a set entirely by him. He's not kidding. I've seen it happen. I've seen him build a set entirely by himself. And it was often for a company who, you know, was like, come on, like we're all in this together. We got to make this happen kind of vibe. And like, sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's not. Do you know the question I'm kind of getting at? Does anybody have I don't know, a thought they want to share about that?
Yeah, I can tell you that sound designers in Philadelphia are regularly asked to be technicians and engineers as a part of that, you know, come on community vibe of, hey, we're all pulling together to make it happen. We're regularly asked to be responsible for the sound system as well, in particular by the smaller companies. Yeah. Right. And I feel like that is taking advantage of the, you know, the community spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to piggyback on that and to sort of clarify, I think that it's I think that younger designers and artists are like much more like victims in that regard. You know, I think those of us who've been around a little longer and who are in a privileged position and have you know, we're not asked to do that as much anymore. I mean, that was definitely something that I was doing, you know, in my 20s, and I didn't mind it so much. It was something that I actually kind of enjoyed, and I liked getting my hands in there. And I certainly wasn't compensated well, and I had to have other jobs, and I, you know, lived paycheck to paycheck and all that good stuff, you know. But I think that it's still happening, and I think that it's particularly acute for younger artists and younger designers.
I think it's an industry problem more than it's a Philly problem.
Yeah,
because it happens everywhere. Yeah, but that's no excuse for it happening here. Right. Yeah, I do think it's an industry problem as well.
So I've been in Philly for what, 7 years, 8 years, something like that. And the 8 out of the first 10 companies that I work for in Philadelphia asked me to either directly or indirectly asked me to be responsible for loading in the sound system or in some way be responsible for it. I had not been asked that question in 20 years. So I don't think it's necessarily a part of it is an industry problem, but part of it is a Philly thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that also has to do with the fact that for a long time, Philly was a non-union town. It's only very recently that that Philly is sort of switching over to unionization, certainly in terms of crew, you know what I mean? So I think it's a little bit of that sort of institutional, or not institutional, but some sort of memory there that, you know. And designers did it. Do you know what I mean? Like, designers in Philly did that. They agreed to do that, so they set the precedent. So
right. LeVonne,
yeah, I was just going to say, you know, it's not unique to Philadelphia, but I would say, what is it, like 3, 4 maybe theaters here that actually have a costume shop with any kind of staff. So, like, you know, it's navigating, like, this is what I'm willing to do. This is what I need help with. Is there more money for that? And sort of expectations. I will tell you, like, about the fourth time I had to go up and down the stairs at the Lantern, I was like done. Like, it's a tricky thing. And again, it's like, if I don't think I could do it unless I worked at UArts, where we have a lot of storage and a costume shop and a dressing room where I can, if I need that space, I can use it. So yeah, it's a challenge. I don't think it's a unique. There are unique things in Philadelphia about that, but I don't think it's sort of uniquely Philadelphian.
As somebody who sits at the table,
I'm so sorry.
People of that, it's funny. It's like, I noticed that idea of like who has crew and who doesn't. Also, like a set designer is less likely to be asked to do certain things than a costume designer in terms of the application of their craft. But it also seems to me that like Philadelphia wasn't maybe 15 years ago as good as a design city. Like it wasn't really as adventurous and as risk-taking and as artistically interesting of a design city 15 years ago when I first got here. Like, now I see designs that like, engage and like are gorgeous on a more regular basis, which is a very good thing. So hopefully maybe the more we support the application of the design, the better the design gets, obviously. So I'm hoping that's something that will continue.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. In the remaining kind of like 10 minutes or so of just, before we get to questions, I want to kind of talk a little bit about our relationship to, and I think this gets back to the fuck it, I'll just do it myself kind of vibe of Philly. But, in the introductions at the beginning of this, each one of us named at least 3 things that we do. And I think we all probably have something like a primary thing that we do, and anywhere between 3 and 12 other things that we do. And so I just want to talk a little bit about like, I feel like everybody I know in Philly is a hyphenated artist in some way. And I wanted us to talk about kind of what that means in this city and why it's so prevalent in this city. So I don't know, anybody wants to jump in first?
I'll just throw this in there real quick. I in order to feel like I fit in more in Philadelphia, I feel like I had to add hyphens.
I'll say, I'll start. For me, it's sort of the main reason why I moved to Philly with New Paradise Laboratories, because at the time, in the late 90s, I was an actor and a designer and making devised work. And it wasn't just about the hyphens in my own practice. It was more about Philly, just the form itself, like the art form of performance was being hyphenated in Philly at the time. And it was a place where dance and theater and spoken word, like everything was sort of crossing over. You had companies emerging at that time like Headlong and Pig Iron and in the late 90s. And for New Paradise, for our company, who was also pursuing a sort of hybrid form of work that was hyphenated in and of itself, even within the work itself, was it dance, was it theater? It felt like a good place for us to land. It felt like as a city, it was welcoming of that kind of hybrid exploration in the form. So for me, that was the thing about Philly that kind of drew me here. I think
chatted, yeah. But I think the Fringe Festival had a big part of that, for that hyphenated aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I stayed in Philly because I felt like I could do whatever I wanted here. I felt really empowered to try things, and that sort of breeds hyphenation. We're making up terms here. It sort of breeds people who sort of like experiment, and I maybe I want to try this, and theaters let you do that. Like, I think I might want to direct. I've never directed before. Can I do that? Sure. yes, here's a play that we think might be a good fit for you, give it a whirl. It's a town that lets you do that. I also think, and this is something that I think is really, really true about our city, and another reason why I think it's a city where people do a lot of different things. The people are craftsmen here. Like, it's like the people who work on a production are all the best people in the world to work on that production at that given moment. Like, I don't know how the town is able to do that. The director is always great. I've had very few experiences where I was working on a play, whether I was in it or wrote it or whatever, where I'm like, what is this person doing here? It has always been like, wow, this person is really good. I gotta really step my game up so that I don't look like a fool. And that has consistently been true. That's been true of the people I'm acting across from. That's been true of the people I'm directing or leading in a production. That's been true of the people who've worked on the plays that I've written. It's like, I hate this word excellence because it's stupid. But there's a real workhorse that meets like rigor and dramaturgy and intelligence around design and intelligence around choices. And I don't know, I see very uninspired things in other places. That's not to say that Philly is the only place where there's like great art being made. That's absolutely not true. But I love the art that gets made here from everybody. Even the things that I don't adore, I'm like, but that's dope. That thing they did at the end with the pipe and the smoke, that was dope. I can walk away from anything I see in this town and go, there were 9 things that were utterly of value that craftsmen made and executed with beauty and intelligence and finesse. And there are many times I go see things in New York and spend a lot more money to see it, plus the train and bus fare, and it doesn't have that thing. And I think it's because, you know, we save your republic every once in a while.
There was no way we're going to get through this whole evening without mentioning that we saved the world.
I think that, you know, also like I think of like Matt, like I think of you as being such an inspiration in terms of the hyphen artist, right? You know, like for me, watching you was like mind blowing. But it was like also because like you as a designer were also like an authorial voice in the work. And that became something that became a pattern in Philly that I personally love and don't see a lot of other places. The idea that designer as author, as creator of the world, as essential as the text. Again, I think that makes for really beautiful design, but I think that some of you people really invented that beautifully, and a lot of us are reaping the rewards of that. So thanks.
Thank you. I mean, there's something also about Philly, though, that it's like, while that excellence is there that James points to, it's also a city. And again, this is my privilege talking a little bit here, but it's a city that allows for failure on some level. And I don't know if it's because we're such a nonprofit oriented city and we don't have the quite the same pressure as like commercial theater does, like in New York or whatever, but you can fail here, like you can fuck up. And take risks accordingly. Do you know what I mean? And then, you know, you can fuck up and, you know, you're not like, you're allowed to work again. Where in some cities, I'm not so sure that would be the case.
And maybe that's the space of community, is that you can fuck up and people still go, that thing they did last season.
Yeah, I mean, I've designed
some. What he did yesterday.
I've designed some real stinkers, man. You know,
there's that too.
That's an excellent thought, James, and I'm gonna cherish that thought for a little bit. Thank you.
I feel like all of my hyphens are in the same column, as opposed to kind of jumping around. But I feel like Philly's a city where you might not succeed unless you have more checks in one column. I've worked with some outside people whose expectations are just different of what you can achieve, or, you know, budgets, or how much, you know, staff, or the level of expertise. And I don't know if they could really or would want to work in Philadelphia full time I don't know. It varies. Like there's some places with great resources and you get all of the things, and then there's other places where you just don't. And I think just because Philadelphia is maybe a smaller theater community than some place like New York, there's more crossover there than there might be other places. And so the more check boxes you have, the better your chances of survival. Or that's been my experience.
We're at the kind of portion of the evening where we want to start addressing some of the questions that'll be in the chat. Oh, I see. Yeah, that would be great. I want to start actually by transitioning straight from a question that Ken put in the chat here, because it speaks to this hyphenization question, but it's a reasonable question actually, and it's kind of a very straightforward one. Is like, also, is the reason we do that a lot is because we don't make a lot of money doing any one thing, so we have to do a lot of things. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know if, like, there's no magical Philadelphia fee structure. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? We're not, so I don't know. Do you guys feel the same way? Was a lot of that, was some of that a product of, you know, inspiration and the generosity of the town, and was some of it just a product of like, I got to work and this is being made available to me? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, Natalie just put something really interesting in the chat about pay scale.
Well, sure, that's true. Yes, Natalie's correct. We do make,
and
more
I agree with
than we
her
do in New
on
York.
that.
Yeah,
that's been my experience too.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost across the board, I've almost always make more money designing a show in Philly than I do in New York, for sure. So Luke's gonna open up the mics for everyone, and then I'd love to, rather than kind of trying to read out the whole question, actually, I'd love, Calvin, if you wouldn't mind asking your question to the group.
Yeah, sure. So in transparency, I just moved here about 3 months ago. So I'm curious about how things are feeling for equity, diversity, and inclusion in Philly. Are we hiring the right folks who we should be hiring? Are the big names in town doing a good job? Is there things that we can do better? That was like 5 questions. I know it was supposed to be 1.
Does anyone want to hit that first?
Yeah, I can talk a bit. I mean, I can only speak. One of the things I forgot to say is that I'm one of the co-artistic directors of the Wilma right now, which is new and started literally when the shutdown started. Like I have not even had a full staff meeting in person with anybody. Like it has all been on Zoom. We are working on being better, and we've done a lot of thinking and planning and policy shifting and changing things to be more equitable. Hiring is tricky. I think we might be one of the few shops in town that's actually hiring people, and that is absolutely a priority that we have in those processes and in those conversations, and being really intentional about that and trying to privilege people who have been historically excluded from not only the Wilma, but just like the regional theaters in general. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are in the structure of the regional theater that privileges whiteness, whether that's from who's funding the art to what they potentially expect to come from that funding. I should probably stop talking about funding so much now that I help run a theater. Like, it's probably not a good idea that I keep talking about this, but it is an actual piece of the puzzle that no one ever wants to talk about, but has a real direct effect on how people hire, how people program, how people educate, all of those things. So I think we have made huge strides. We've done a lot of work. There's still a ton of work left to do. And I would say that we're probably in good company with the rest of the community, but I can't speak for everybody else.
Does anyone else have a thought. I also want to like make sure you or make sure. I just want to again, all 5 of you are teachers at separate institutions, so if you find yourself wanting to speak to that part of the conversation as well, I didn't get the chance to really ask you all about it in the hour, but you know, whether it's Swarthmore or Villanova or UArts or Rowan or you know, I feel like one of the elements that we've seen in the Philadelphia area, at least, is that there is very much a reactivity to companies that aren't behaving correctly. And we have a lot of access to the people who run those organizations in a way that other cities might not, often very direct access. And so when those issues come to light, sometimes it goes really well and sometimes it goes really, really poorly. And so just to echo what James saying, like we're figuring it out, and you know, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing. So does anyone else have a thought at that, especially at your school? I'd be curious what you guys think as teachers too, from that point of view.
Well, at Swarthmore, you know, we've just started to do some real work, just like beginning to do the work on like anti-racism work and kind of trying to decolonize our syllabi. And really, we're bringing consultants in to work with us, consultants of color. Our faculty is pretty white, and we have, you know, deep structures of whiteness. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's just like I think like every major institution in the country right now. So we, you know, we've just started that work and I'm excited about it, and it's going to be never ending, but we've started, and that's the important thing. I think at this point, it's like an alcoholic admitting that they have a problem. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's when the work can start, you know. I don't know how the other schools, people on the panel, or how you're, you know, what the situation is, but that's where we are.
That's where I feel like we are. We're acknowledging, trying to make shifts and changes, some big ones, some small. There's been a few instances where I feel like I was chosen to show up as a representation of diversity in our program. I am the only Black female full-time person in the department, and so there's some of that. There's some like, we want your opinion because you're here, and it's like, this really has nothing to do with me. I don't even, you know, depending on the discussion we're having. So it's kind of trying to tread those things of like trying to acknowledge that there's a problem and include people, and finding the right ways to do that so that it actually makes a difference.
Edward asks an interesting question that I think it's worth talking about. It essentially comes down to, what have we been up to since March as a city? I'd be curious what your reflections are on the kind of work we've been making or not making since March, and our efforts to get back, because some of them have been successful, some of them have been controversial, some of them have been disasters. So I'd be curious what you guys think about, you know, just where we are as a city, as a theater making city since March, since the pandemic started. Brenna, I'm going to make you go first.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. I mean, personally, I know that I've been incredibly busy creating work off of outside of traditional theater. I know for the Wilma did this incredible radio play, James. I haven't seen you in the window since then, but that was just amazing. The Is God Is radio that Thom through the 2XL program created this incredible radio piece, like the sound, the foley of it, the breadth of it. It was a stunning piece. So like, that's an example of something that's, I thought was like a high mark in terms of like non-theater activity here. I know the Wilma Theater's coming out with the Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which looks like it's going to be pretty amazing. So like that was exciting. I'm sorry I keep talking about New Paradise, but New Paradise like opened up some of their vaults, and I got to see work that I hadn't seen before, and that was incredible. I mean, getting to watch Batch again was just like to share that with my friends and be like, look at this piece that happened. They're like, that's been incredible. What else has been really incredible? Really cool stuff. Yes. So yeah, you know, so some people are moving forward and some people are waiting, and I think that's okay. Like, I think it's completely cool if some companies are like, we're gonna wait for a minute, and we're gonna, you know, we're just gonna wait. Like, I think it's been not just in Philly, but the pandemic, hopefully has given people a chance to be like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And in what way am I doing it? Like, if nothing else, to really force us to like ask what we're doing. So, I mean, I kind of keep saying like, this has been a gift in some ways. And I think that we can come out of this better. And I want us to come out of this better. We'll see. But so that's some of the highlights that have been happening. You know, I'll drop a link in the chat if you want to take a look at a digital piece that I have playing right now.
By far, the most of the work that I've done since March has been college university theater. And the conversations that are happening in the Zoom rooms at the college university level about, you know, what is this thing called theater, and what are we doing now? What can we do now? Exploring this new medium that we're all in essentially are fascinating and frustrating and thought-provoking and angering, but it's been a delight to be able to connect with students at this time, at least for me, at Swarthmore and at Temple, and to have those kind of profound conversations about, you know, what is theater right now.
Can I ask you all a question? I know that like for me, there's a lot of articles about like, is this theater? Is this theater? I've never really been worried about that in the pandemic so far. Of like, is this theater? I'm like, oh, is that a problem? So I don't know. I'm just sort of curious about, yeah.
Not to me. I mean, I'm right there with you, Brenna. I've been like, what a gift. What an opportunity to sort of like assess, to examine, to like think about what do we believe about ourselves as theater makers, like, and how do we hold that true if we can't go inside of a theater with 300 people or 100 people or 50 people and watch a play? Do you cease to be a director? Do I cease to be a playwright because that isn't in place? And it's interesting teaching people theater right now with that question looming over everything that we do, is when I'm talking to you about objective and walking across the room and it's in this, is it still theater? And I'm like, yeah, why not? I think we rarefy the gathering in a holy space too much. That's it.
I could definitely say my students have been better about sort of rebounding and figuring out ways to, you know, manage projects that they were really excited about, and you know, they're still coming to class and they still want to do all this, and that gives me hope. I think my own personal attitude has been a little less hopeful. I mean, I suffered some family tragedies, and I just sort of lost my mojo a little bit. But the one discussion I had with the theater about trying to do something in a space, you know, live but socially distanced and with testing and with masks and face shields, I was like, thank you for all of that information. That sounds terrible. Like, I actually just don't want to like feel any sort of fear, or, you know, that would like not be a great experience for me. You know, if I'm working on something that's going to be virtual, and I'm up for that. But Yeah, I think our younger generation is really inspiring, and that's who I'm looking to right now to see for inspiration on how to deal with all of this.
I think the two companies I spend most of my time with are the Wilma and the Arden. And to me, they represent the kind of scale of energy that's gone into what to do in this time, because the Wilma or the Arden has made this kind of institutional decision of we're just going to wait. We're just going to wait, and we're just going to not do anything until it's time, until we can. Whereas the Wilma is like guns a-blazing, trying to do everything. And, you know, I mean, like the first one through the wall always gets bloody. So like that hasn't always gone well this year. But do you know what I mean? And like I would say Philly is everywhere in between right now. But to me, those are the two polar, like one huge institution that's essentially gone into hibernation, and the other one that is maybe more active than ever in a lot of ways.
And the Walnut Street Theater has barbed wire up. So just in terms of just getting the triangle of.
Is that real?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yes.
There's actual barbed wire in front of the wall.
Literally.
Wow.
I love that.
Wow. If that's not a metaphor, I don't know what is.
Yeah, right? Wow.
Luke asked a question about how the co-artistic director works, which I think is an interesting one. Because it is a really valuable, like how does that work at the Wilma, but also like I think everyone in this group at some level, at some point in their time in Philly, has been a co-something. Like Brenna and I are co-founders of Diecast. Matt, you're co-associate artistic director, I think, of New Paradise, right, with Jorg?
No,
was or something.
It's just me. I'm the associate artistic director.
Okay. I do think it is an interesting thing that happens. I wouldn't say frequently, but there's often this thing that happens sometimes around here. And I wonder, especially with the co-artistic director with the Wilma, but maybe just in general, like why is it that seems to work okay here, or does it work okay here?
Well, the Wilma historically has always, for years and years and years, was run by two people.
Right.
Now that was a very different relationship than what we have now. You know, the Arden was essentially founded by three people. So it is definitely in the water. At the Wilma, it's, you know, we're all on Zoom. We all really like each other. We all support each other. 4 brains is always better than 1. It doesn't feel like too many cooks in the kitchen. It definitely feels like a collaboration. One of us can sort of fall back for whatever reason. Like I had a death in the family this summer that I had to really sort of pull back from the organization for like 3 weeks. And it was great. If I'd have been the only artistic director, probably would have been bad in that moment. I like it. I like the idea of thinking together with other people, and imagining together with other people. Yeah, that's my experience of it. And also, like, I helped run an organization that was like Orbiter 3 was like all consensus based. So everything we did, we decided whether or not we were going to do something together. That's madness. That was much more difficult than what we're doing at the moment now.
Does anyone else have a thought on that?
Thom, can I ask another question?
Shoot.
I'm just curious, like your thoughts on in the civic image of Philadelphia, the role that theater plays. I remember when I left Philadelphia, because I mentioned earlier I grew up there. The Wilma was on Spruce Street. The Arden was on St. Stephen's. They were little kind of scratchy spaces, you know. And then when I came back, it was like the city had. It seemed like the city had decided the arts and theater and performance and buildings were going to be a way of kind of reconfiguring itself as or making a play to reconfigure itself as a kind of a city of professionals and a city of the professional managerial class that had culture, with a C, at least in that particular version of it. I guess that might have been early 2000s or something when that happened, and pushed the image that the politicians had of what culture did as an engine. And I'm curious, how you feel if that is still kind of in the minds of the body politic, what theater does, or if that's shifted or changed, or whether your vision of how that has been implemented from a sort of structural political level is different than what I've observed from the outside.
I think what you observed might potentially be a direct result of an initiative by a former mayor, Ed Rendell, who pretty much single-handedly created the Avenue of the Arts, if you will, back in the late 90s, and kind of really formalized that as that capital C culture that you're talking about. He kind of formalized it in a real sort of civic way by creating the Avenue of the Arts and kind of beefing all of that up, the visibility of all that, I should say.
Yeah, there was this period of time from the mid 90s to the early 2000s where, as you pointed out, the Arden moved into a new building, the Wilma moved into the new building, the Kimmel was built, Philadelphia Theater Company moved into a new building, theaters were being renovated all over, and I guess there's sort of a question embedded there of has the city of Philadelphia lived up to the promise of the Avenue of the Arts? Does that question make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
I don't think it has personally, but
What was the promise of the Avenue of the Arts? I mean, I mean that all the Wilma is, an amazing national treasure as far as I'm concerned. The Kimmel's kicks ass sometimes, and sometimes, it's the Kimmel, but architecturally, I don't know. What?
I mean, I guess it kind of like the sports metaphor that Thom launched this whole thing on, it's like the Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, they will come. I mean, so I'm not sure, I think what we're really talking about is audience, right? I mean, are the audiences there? Are they still there? Look at Miss Pat.
Miss Pat.
We should ask her. She's been
Well,
here the whole
Well, I've
time.
been listening. I'm sorry, and I was late. I forgot I had another meeting at 7, so I was late to this. So I'm trying to catch up. So I've just been listening. But that whole Avenue of the Arts thing, it sounded really great and really good. And then the city didn't quite hold up its end because it was supposed to extend north of Broad Street as well. And it didn't, which is why Freedom Theater is no longer there. Okay. So right, they were building this cultural artistic corridor for everyone, for all of us. And those theaters that were lucky enough to be on the south side of Broad Street, close to City Hall, and in that center city district of tourism are the ones that they helped to hype, and the ones that they funded, and the ones that they lifted up into the light. Things that are on the north side of Broad Street that light did not extend that far up until now, when they renovated the Met and took that over. But even that is a recent addition. That renovation was one that was supposed to be happening years and years and years and years in the making. The renovation of the Uptown still has not happened, and Freedom Theater is now gone. Thank you, Temple University.
The Met is a commercial venture.
Oh, yeah. Most deaf.
Yeah.
Pat, just I don't want to interrupt, but I just for anybody on this meeting or salon who doesn't get who hasn't quite keyed into the geographical reference that Pat is making, because Philly is new to you. Pat, could you maybe expand on why north of Market
Yes.
Broad Street north of Market was left out of the, in case it isn't self-evident to everybody?
Right. Yes. So if you don't know Philadelphia theater history, Freedom Theater was an African-American theater company founded, oh my God, what, in the late 50s, early 60s?
Yeah.
John Allen and oh God, what's Bob's last name? Robert, I can't remember Bob's last name. Johnny Hobbs came through Freedom Theater. Patricia Scott Hobbs, his wife, came through Freedom Theater and was a teacher still there at the school that was there. When I was growing up in Philadelphia, the Uptown Theater was where I saw Stevie Wonder. I saw little Stevie Wonder at the Uptown. And the Met, when I was growing up, the Met was the gospel center of the universe. Anybody that was a gospel singer came to Philadelphia and sang at the Met. But all of those places were allowed to fall into disrepair and fall on hard times. And no matter what organization stepped up to try and help them, it was never enough. Meanwhile, on the south side of City Hall, the Wilma got a building from the ground up. It was an amazing thing for the city. It was published, advertised everywhere. It was beautiful. The whole thing about the Kimmel Center, oh my God, the Kimmel Center going up was just huge. And it's that thing, which only goes to emphasize again more and more and more and more where we live and the time that we live in. And now that Freedom Theater has been lost, and the Met is now a commercial venue, I don't know if anything is going to actually happen on the north side. The Uptown is like the last holdout, but I think that the woman who was heading up that committee for it, if I remember, Monday night at the Theater Philadelphia thing, she passed away. I didn't even know she passed away. Her picture and all of that came up in the memorandum, and I was totally speechless because I did not know that. So it's just now what happens. So hopefully within all of these conversations that are happening, that part of the conversation is also happening. There is a broader scope of where things got shut down and who was shut down and why. Is that being talked about? Is that being addressed? Is anybody saying anything about how we can also allow spaces to be reclaimed by African-American artists? I know that everybody's trying to make room, quote unquote, where they are to allow everybody to come in. But say I didn't work at the Wilma and I didn't want to work at the Wilma. I wanted to work in my own space because that space was there. Is there a way for me to get that back? Is there a way for that land to be reclaimed? I just don't know if that conversation is happening. And maybe since there's so much on the table to dismantle and to talk about, it's got to wait its turn. But there's just so many things for us all to find an actual open space where we can all fit. The devil is truly in the details, and the details of who we were, who we are now, and who we're trying to be. What we're trying to be as a theater community. How are we trying to shape that so that everybody feels welcome and supported and seen? And the hope that folks don't get exhausted trying to figure out how to make that happen, because that's big work. That's heavy lifting. but it's work that has been denied and lied about and covered up for so long. I pray that we all have the stamina and the faith in each other to actually look each other in the face and say all the things. Because if we can't figure out how to say all the things to each other, it's not going to really get any better. It's really not. It's really not. We have got to have the really hard, nasty conversations. We have to have them. There's so much hurt, and there's so much anger, and there's so much pain to overcome. But also, because we are a theater community that sees each other and looks out for each other, we really do. The dream is that we can actually get to the other side of this thing all together. I'm hoping that there are more open conversations like this so that we can all plug in to each other and know where we are and what we're doing and who's doing and who's not doing, and what that means. Because, there's a lot of us and everybody ain't gonna want to go. And that's okay too.
But, sorry.
No. It's okay because you know how I get. So you can shut me up and I ain't mad.
Well, I cannot. So our official end time is 8:30, but we are keeping the Zoom up until 9, I believe. Luke, is that correct? To just hang out, have a drink, keep talking. I cannot think of a better way to close this out than to have the voice of the heart and soul of this theater community, Pat Adams. So thank you for that, Pat. Anybody who doesn't know, Pat is the longtime resident stage manager of the Wilma Theater, I guess is what.
Yeah, that's what they call it now.
And a voice who has been in my ear for a dozen years now, and I'm very thankful for it. So, so I just want to close out this recorded part of it, but just by way of saying, thank you for everyone for coming and for being here, and for thank you to the panel, and thank you to Wingspace for hosting this. And like I said, the Zoom will say open, crack open a beer, we can keep talking. But
thanks for having us.
Yes, I got me a little.
Thank you.
Glass.
Thank you.
Maybe in the last, while we're just hanging out, E.L. Hahn wrote in the chat, what would be your advice to someone new to Philadelphia?
Oh yeah, totally.
And I know Calvin is also new.
You guys hit that. I'm going to step away real quick and then come right back in.
Yeah, I don't know how other folks who've been in Philly for a while feel about that. What advice you might give someone new?
Back in the day, I would say crash opening night parties, but
Yeah.
I don't know that's got the same mojo